A man spent $30,000 fighting his HOA in court because they wanted to fine him for parking his own truck in his own driveway, and he still lost. If you think homeowners associations are just annoying groups that complain about lawn height, you have no idea how bad things can actually get. These organizations have destroyed marriages, bankrupted families, and even put people in jail. And the worst part, it's all completely legal. Every single day in America, someone gets a letter from their HOA. Most of the time it has something small like your trash cans being visible from the street, or your mailbox being the wrong shade of black. Annoying, sure, but you pay the fine and move on. But sometimes, these neighborhood groups go way too far. They abuse their power, they ignore common sense, and they make people's lives absolutely miserable. Today, I'm going to show you some of the most insane HOA cases that have ever happened, stories where regular people lost everything because of rules that make zero sense. And I'm going to explain exactly how HOAs have this much power in the first place. So first, let's talk about what an HOA actually is and why they exist. HOA stands for Homeowners Association. When you buy a house in certain neighborhoods, you automatically become a member. You don't get to choose. The second you sign those papers, you agree to follow their rules and pay their fees. These fees can be anywhere from $50 a month to over $1,000, depending on where you live. The idea behind HOAs sounds pretty reasonable at first. They're supposed to maintain property values, keep the neighborhood looking nice, and manage shared spaces like pools or parks. They create rules about what color you can paint your house, how tall your grass can be, where you can park, what kind of decorations you can put up, all that stuff. The goal is to stop one person from doing something crazy that makes everyone else's home worth less money. But here's the problem. HOA letters are run by volunteers from the neighborhood. Your neighbors. People who might have way too much free time and way too much interest in controlling what you do with your own property. And once they get a little bit of power, some of them go absolutely insane with it. They start enforcing rules that don't make sense. They create new rules just to target people they don't like. And because the law is on their side, there's not much you can do about it. Most people don't even realize how much power their HOA has until it's too late. These organizations can put liens on your house, they can take you to court, and in some states, they can actually foreclose on your home and sell it if you don't pay their fines. Yeah, you heard that right. You can lose your house because you didn't cut your grass on time. And it happens more often than you think. Let me tell you about a guy named Larry Murphree from Florida. Larry bought a house in a neighborhood with an HOA back in the early 2000s. Everything was fine for a while. He followed the rules, paid his fees, no problems. But then the HOA started going after him for the smallest things. They said his driveway was stained. They said his fence was 6 inches too tall. They said he parked his truck in a spot that technically violated some rule buried deep in the HOA handbook that nobody actually reads. Larry fought back. He didn't think these complaints were fair, and he refused to pay the fines. So the HOA kept adding more fines. Late fees, legal fees, interest on the fines. It snowballed. Within a few years, Larry owed the HOA thousands of dollars. And because he still refused to pay, the HOA put a lien on his house. Then they foreclosed. They sold his house at auction for just over $3,000 to cover the fees he owed. $3,000. For a house that was worth way more than that. Larry lost everything because of some stains on his driveway and a truck that was parked in the wrong spot. He tried to fight it in court, but the law was clear. The HOA had the right to do what they did. It didn't matter that the punishment didn't fit the crime. It didn't matter that it seemed cruel and unfair. The contract Larry signed when he bought the house gave the HOA that power. And Larry's story is not unique. There are thousands of cases just like his. People losing their homes over the dumbest reasons you can imagine. An elderly woman in Texas lost her house because she owed $800 in HOA fees. The HOA sold it at auction for $3,500. She had lived there for decades. Gone, just like that. Another case. A veteran named Jim Henderson in Arizona got fined by his HOA because he had an American flag in his front yard. The whole rule said no flagpoles allowed. Jim argued that as a veteran, he had the right to display the flag. The HOA didn't care. They kept fining him. Eventually, the fines got so high that Jim had to hire a lawyer. He spent thousands of dollars fighting this case. And yeah, he eventually won because there are laws protecting the right to display the American flag. But by the time it was over, Jim had spent more money on legal fees than his house was worth. The stress from the whole situation ruined his health. He said in an interview that fighting his HOA was more stressful than serving in the military. Let's talk about another one. A couple in North Carolina named Greg and Shelley bought a house in a quiet neighborhood. They loved it. Big backyard, nice neighbors. Good schools nearby, perfect. But a few months after they moved in, they adopted a dog. A really sweet dog, not aggressive at all, just a regular pet. The problem? The dog was a pit bull mix. And the HOA had a rule that bans certain dog breeds, including anything that looked like a pit bull. The HOA sent Greg and Shelley a letter saying they had 30 days to get rid of the dog or face fines. They tried to fight it. They showed the whole paperwork proving the dog was well behaved, had training certificates, everything. Didn't matter. The rules said no pit bulls, and the HOA wasn't budging. So Greg and Shelley had a choice: give up their dog or pay hundreds of dollars in fines every single month until they moved. They couldn't afford the fines, and they didn't want to give up their dog. So they sold their house and moved. They lost money on the sale because they had to sell fast, and they spent thousands on moving costs. All because of a rule about dog breeds. A rule that didn't make their neighborhood any safer or better. Just a rule that gave the HOA control. Here's another insane one. A woman named Sandra in Nevada decided to paint her front door a different color. She thought it would make her house look nicer and more welcoming. She picked a color that wasn't too wild. Just a darker shade of red, but the HOA said it violated their rules. Only certain colors were approved, and red wasn't on the list. Sandra got a letter demanding she repaint the door or pay a fine. She repainted it, but the HOA said the new color still wasn't approved. So she got fined anyway. She tried repainting it again. Still not good enough. The HOA kept rejecting every color she picked, even colors that other houses in the neighborhood already had. Sandra started to think they were just messing with her on purpose. She hired a lawyer and found out that the whole board president lived a few houses down and had a personal grudge against her over some argument they had at a neighborhood meeting months earlier. Sandra eventually won her case, but it took 2 years and cost her over $15,000 in legal fees. $15,000 because someone didn't like the color of her door. And even though she won, the HOA never apologized. They just moved on to bothering someone else. Now let's talk about what happens when HOAs go after people for even smaller things. A man in Illinois got fined because his grass was half an inch too tall. Half an inch. The whole rule said grass couldn't be taller than 2 inches, and his was 2.5. He got a notice, ignored it because he thought it was ridiculous, and then got hit with a $50 fine. When he didn't pay the fine, it doubled. Then it tripled. Within 6 months, he owed over $1,000 because his grass was slightly too tall one time. There is a family in Georgia who got fined because their kids left a basketball hoop in the driveway. The HOA said it was an eyesore and violated the rules about storing sports equipment in visible areas. The family moved the hoop to the backyard, but the HOA said the fine still applied because the violation had already happened. They tried to argue that it was just a basketball hoop and the kids were just playing outside like normal kids do. The HOA didn't care. Pay the fine or we'll take you to court. And it gets worse. There are cases where HOA letters have gone after people for displaying Christmas lights too early, for having the wrong type of flowers in their garden, for using the wrong brand of roof shingles during repairs. There was even a case where an HOA fined someone for having a wreath on their door in July. A wreath because apparently decorations are only allowed during certain times of the year. You might be wondering, can't people just fight back? Can't they vote out the bad HOA board members and fix the problem? In theory, yes. But in practice, it's way harder than it sounds. A lot of people in HOA neighborhoods don't even show up to the meetings. They're busy. They don't care, or they just assume someone else will handle it. So the same small group of people stays in power year after year. And if you try to challenge them, they can make your life even worse. They'll find more rules you're breaking. They'll fine you for things they ignore when other people do it. They'll drag you into legal battles that cost you a fortune. Some HOA letters are also managed by companies that get paid based on how many fines they collect. Think about that. They have a financial incentive to find violations and punish people. The more they fine you, the more money they make. So they're not looking out for the neighborhood. They're looking out for their own paycheck. But here's the craziest part. All of this is completely legal. When you buy a house in a HOA neighborhood, you sign a contract agreeing to follow their rules. And courts almost always side with the HOA because you agreed to the terms. It doesn't matter if the rules are unfair. It doesn't matter if the punishment is extreme. You signed the contract. So you're stuck. There have been some cases where people have successfully fought back. But it takes years and costs a ton of money. Most people can't afford that. So they either pay the fines, follow the ridiculous rules, or sell their house and leave. And even if you sell, good luck finding a buyer who wants to deal with the same HOA nonsense you just escaped from. The power that HOA letters have is actually shocking when you look into it. In some states, they can foreclose on your house without even going to court first. They just file the paperwork, auction off your home, and that's it. You're done. There are stories of people coming home from vacation to find out their house was sold while they were gone because they missed an HOA payment. And it's not just about fines and foreclosures. HOA letters can also control way more of your life than you realize. They can tell you when you're allowed to water your lawn. They can ban certain types of pets. They can stop you from running a business out of your home, even if it's just a small online shop that doesn't bother anyone. They can tell you what time you need to bring in your trash cans. They can fine you if your car is parked on the street overnight. They can even tell you what kind of curtains you're allowed to have because they were visible from outside. There was a case in California where an HOA tried to ban a family from homeschooling their kids. The HOA said that having kids at home during school hours created too much noise and violated the quiet hours rule. The family fought it and won, but only after spending months dealing with legal threats and stress. Another case involved a man who installed solar panels on his roof to save money on electricity. The HOA said the panels were ugly and violated the architectural rules. The man argued that state law protected his right to use solar energy. He was right, but the HOA still dragged him through months of legal battles before finally backing down. Here's one that really shows how far HOA letters will go. A woman in Florida had cancer and was going through chemotherapy. She was too sick to keep up with yard work, so her grass got a little overgrown. Her neighbors knew she was sick. Everyone on the street knew. But the HOA didn't care. They fined her anyway. When she couldn't pay because of her medical bills, they threatened to put a lien on her house. Her story went viral, and people were so outraged that the HOA finally dropped the fines. But they only did it because of the bad publicity. If the story hadn't gone viral, she probably would have lost her home. So what can you do if you're stuck in one of these situations? Honestly, your options are pretty limited. You can try to work with the HOA and hope they're reasonable. You can hire a lawyer, but that's expensive, and there's no guarantee you'll win. You can try to get involved in the HOA board yourself and change things from the inside. But that takes time and effort. And you'll probably make enemies in the process. The best advice is to avoid buying a house in an HOA neighborhood in the first place. Before you buy, read through all the rules. And I mean all of them. Don't just skim. Actually read the whole thing. Talk to people who already live there and ask them what the HOA is really like. Check online reviews and local forums. If you see a bunch of complaints about the HOA being crazy, believe them and walk away. If you already own a house in an HOA neighborhood, document everything. Keep records of all your communications with the HOA. Take photos showing that you're following the rules. If they fine you for something, make sure you understand exactly what rule you supposedly broke and whether they're even enforcing it correctly. A lot of times, HOA letters will fine you for things that aren't actually in the official rules, and if you can prove that, you might be able to fight it. There are also some states that have started passing laws to limit HOA power. These laws make it harder for HOA letters to foreclose on homes, and they require HOA letters to be more transparent about their finances and decision-making. But these laws vary a lot depending on where you live, and most states still give HOA letters way too much control. The bottom line is this: HOA letters were created with good intentions, but too many of them have turned into little dictatorships run by people who care more about power and control than actually helping the neighborhood. And because the law is on their side, they can get away with ruining people's lives over the smallest, most ridiculous things. Stained driveways, tall grass, wrong color doors, basketball hoops, Christmas wreaths. Things that have zero impact on anyone else, but somehow justify thousands of dollars in fines and legal battles if you're dealing with an HOA. Right now, just know you're not alone. Millions of people are in the same boat. And while it might feel hopeless sometimes, there are ways to fight back. It's just not easy, and it's not cheap. But the more people speak out about HOA abuse, the more likely it is that laws will change to protect homeowners from this kind of nonsense. If this video opened your eyes to how insane HOA letters can be, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.